In previous modules, we've been looking at risk and return in terms of individual investments as well as portfolios of investments. Throughout the remainder of this topic, we will continue to explore the nature and characteristics of investments in portfolios. We will begin by discussing the historical trade-off between risk and return. We have already talked about the direct relationship between risk and return. When risk increases, so does return, and vice versa. This is an automatic outcome as a result of market forces, supply and demand, and the fact that because most investors are risk averse, the market behaves as if everybody is risk averse. But just because there is a positive relationship between risk and return, we need to look a little more deeply into that relationship. For example, is it a linear or straight line relationship, or is it more complex than that? This has been investigated by plotting the historical relationship between risk and return for individual shares, as well as for portfolios of shares or other investments. We're going to look at the historical relationship between risk and return for 5 different portfolios of investments: large US shares, corporate bonds, small US shares, treasury bills, which are short-term securities issued by the US Treasury. In Australia we call them treasury notes, and large world shares, which means large shares from around the world. We will plot the relationship on a set of axes as shown here. In fact, we'll be plotting a number of graphs on axes just like these in this topic. We put risk on the horizontal axis, in this case as measured by the historical volatility or standard deviation of returns. And we put the historical average return on the vertical axis. The intuition behind this is that risk is the independent variable, or the variable that determines the level of return, which we call the dependent variable. Individual shares tend to plot about here, with standard deviations between about 25 and 60%, and with returns between about 5 and 20%. Despite what we've said earlier about the relationship between risk and return, there doesn't appear to be a clear relationship between risk and return for individual shares. Next, we plot the 5 portfolios mentioned earlier. As you can see, there is a clear positive relationship. The greater the risk, the greater the return. And if we draw a line of best fit, we can see that it approximates a linear relationship. The risk-return relationship is almost perfectly straight line, with higher risk portfolios, such as shares, enjoying a higher return than low-risk portfolios, such as government securities and corporate bonds. Of more significance, we can see that for a given level of return, portfolios of investments have less risk. What is it about investing in portfolios rather than individual shares that allows us to get the same expected return with less risk? You may already have some idea based on what we have discussed in previous modules. We will explore this further in the remaining modules in this topic.